So good evening, afternoon or morning, everyone, and welcome to ISSEME's virtual seminar series. It is my pleasure to introduce Mike Bindley today, the chair of TOBI, the professional organization for teachers of Old English in Britain and Ireland. And since today's seminar is co-organized with TOBI, he kindly agreed to chair the session. Mike is a senior lecturer at the Department of English, Theatre and Creative Writing at Birkbeck, and his research focuses on landscape, environment, settlements, and plant life in early medieval England and Scandinavia. So a couple of words about the organization he's here for today. TOBI aims to promote and support the teaching of Old English in British and Irish universities, and to raise the profile of all things early medieval England in the public eye. In spite of its name, the organization welcomes teachers of Old English from every country. And among its 200 members are many who teach outside the UK and Ireland, me included. Well, not now any longer, but at the time I joined, I wasn't teaching in the UK. So TOBI is also especially welcoming to ECRs and postgraduates who comprise half of TOBI's committee and have been instrumental in furthering online research events in recent years. TOBI publishes a great newsletter, conducts workshops and annual meetings, which are great fun. And as a long-time member myself, I can only highly recommend TOBI for inspiring scholarly events and for facilitating networking and support for everyone in our discipline. Welcome, Mike, and I give over to you now. Great to have you here today.
Thank you so much for those very kind words. This is one of those cases where we keep introducing each other. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, wherever your comfy chair may sit. It gives me great pleasure on behalf of TOBI to introduce Professor Gabriele Knappe, Professor of English Linguistics and Medieval Studies at the University of Bamberg. Members of ISSEME and indeed TOBI will know her extensive work on Old English historical linguistics and rhetoric, but she has teaching and research interests that range widely across Old and Middle English and historical linguistics more broadly, including linguistic medievalisms, and that is the subject of today's paper, Bridging Cultures by Teaching Linguistic Medievalisms. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mike, for this kind introduction, and thank you very much, Edith and Thais, for having me here and for giving me the chance to present on my current explorations into linguistic medievalism and how to use it for teaching Old English. Yeah, I want to share my thoughts about and my experience with teaching linguistic medievalism, or rather teaching Old English with the help of a rather new development in the tele-cinematic medium. Tele-cinematic just tries to comprise the television and the movie sector. So there is recreated conversation in old languages, reconstructed Old English, and that makes it also relevant for the teachers of Old English in Britain and Ireland and everywhere else. And I'm very happy that you are here and also to take part in the discussion and tell me maybe about your own experience. So, in how far can representations of old language stages in action may be helpful as aids in teaching? Patricia Noel and myself have published our experience on a lecture about teaching linguistic medievalism in German and English in the year 2000 in the COVID semester. That's an online, it's available online release. So we did have some experience together, and I alone, and at the moment I am teaching a lecture called Linguistic Medievalism, I invited my students to take part in this presentation, and maybe they can contribute to the discussion later on, and certainly they contribute to the contents of my slides, as you will see. So what I really like is the thought that W.H. Auden is supposed to have invented, and which you can find in Ian Mortimer's book, 2008. He once suggested that to understand our own country, you have to have lived at least into others. One can say something similar for periods of time. To understand your own century, you need to have come to terms with at least two others. How can you come to terms with other centuries, one wonders? And exactly that tele-cinematic medium gives us a way to experience realism, or something that is felt to be authentic, some immediacy and ease of identification with characters, better than books, or at least more timely to many of our students. So the office of us teachers would be to bridge a gap, to bridge a difference between the now and the then. And this is, of course, very much simplified, because there is not just one now and not just one then. In particular, it would be popular culture today and academic culture of us. And the approaches to medieval England are different in popular culture and academic culture, although they are starting to converge in new trends in telecinematic discourse, which has been titled New Realism, and we'll come back to this. And very importantly, we have to do this together, teachers and students together. So welcome the students who are here again. And also I said that I have collected my experience in lectures. Now, these lectures are kind of voluntary. So the students who are there come there because of their intrinsic motivation to learn about Old English. It's not an obligatory class, and they don't write an exam at the end. So there's no pressure on them, and they can come freely. So that's probably a difference to classes that are taught obligatorily on Old English. However, I suppose that you can actually use elements of what you did today, or have used, for these classes as well. So to run you through my plan very quickly, first, what is linguistic medievalism? What is Neo-Old English? And then Old English in the telecinematic medium, a short overview, and the popularity among my students, because I asked them, and I have some stats. Then the largest part of my presentation will be on case studies of telecinematic Neo-Old English in university teaching. And for this talk, actually, I came up with a new classification and actually development of what is going on in this medium, which I hope you'll find interesting. Now, my students pointed out that there's hardcore. So there's Old English, which is created by the generation of our students and a little older, so you could call them Gen Z, and the generation before. It would be their own Old English, possibly. And a short evaluation and outlook at the end. So what is linguistic medievalism? What is Neo-Old English? Medievalism has been defined in many ways, but I suppose for our purposes, a short definition given by Richard Woods would be all right. He said that medievalism can be seen as the broad cultural phenomenon of reinventing, remembering, recreating, and reenacting the Middle Ages. Of course, every one of us knows reenacting of Middle Ages, old costumes, tournaments, medieval markets. Okay, that is a kind of reenacting that is around quite a lot. Linguistic medievalism, however, is something more new as far as popular culture is concerned. Of course, scholarly endeavors have been there for a long time to recreate Old English. So that could be defined as remembering, recreating, and reenacting medieval vernacular languages. And among those, Old English would then come up as Neo-Old English and would be defined, according to Oliver Traxel's classification, as academically sound modern creations in Old English. Right, so this is what we'll be talking about in the next 20 to 30 minutes. Here's an overview of telecinematic Neo-Old English productions, which I have classified into several chunks. The first one would be The Lord of the Rings, and this is a chronological list inspired by Facebook's blog post on the internet. Old English is Alive. So it would be The Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson, The Two Towers. There's a song, Eowyn's Lament, which we'll look into a bit more closely later. Robert Zemetsky's Beowulf, where we have the monster Grendel whining in Old English. Essentially, that's what he does. And BBC Merlin, a whole series where Merlin casts his spells in an old tongue. And that's not Celtic, it's Old English. The second would be an experimental film, De Shadow von Bonifatius, where Boniface and Gregorius speak Old English to each other. Vikings, a series that was 6 seasons and numerous dialects in the old vernaculars. Several medieval languages are depicted there. In Don Kaudakovsky's Tolkien, we find, in this biopic, we find Tolkien proving his scholarship at one point, speaking Old English, but that's only a very short scene. So these are, apart from Kaudakovsky Tolkien, also to be found on this blog post. Then I would like to have a little excursus on We Foreigners. Those of you who don't know it yet will find it fascinating, I hope. Here we have dialogues in Old Norse, unfortunately not Old English, this is why it's an excursus here. And finally, Barco, which was born on the 20th of April 2020. So very recent phenomenon on the internet. The familiarity of these types among my students is fairly diverse. So the older ones, Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings, etc., is known to most. But I didn't ask for that special film, I asked in general. BBC Merlin was watched by my students when they were teenagers, I suppose. Vikings were known by 8 of 22, so still quite a lot. Beowulf as such by 5, and Be Foreigners by none. I added Barco later. I think it was about 4 people showing up when I asked at a later point, so that was not on October the 20th. This is why it's printed in red. Right, so let's get to our case studies, hands-on. Neo-Old English in university teaching. Eowyn's Lament for Theodred is not originally Tolkien. It has been invented, it was invented later, and it was given Old English as its language. It's a very, very beautiful song, as I think, and I would like to give you the time to enjoy it together with me now. So this beautiful song was worded by David Sadel, and he translated the lyrics into Old English. Well, when I say he translated the lyrics, that's not quite right. He created the lyrics in a way that is very medieval. So what can be discussed with this scene? What would be possible discussion points or maybe tasks? One of them might be a formulaic language. So the whole subject, the whole topic of oral formulaic poetry, stock expressions that poets and also the audience knew, and the new piecing together of these stock expressions in a creative way for a new song. And I took out a little scene and I point out one particularity which you might have noticed while watching the video, or you might not. So you can see the woman standing next to Eowyn, singing the song with her, and the other character in the back as well. Also at another point in the song do they do that. So these lines can be completed by others because it's formulaic language. So that's, I find, very, very interesting. You could from there go to the function of dirges in Old English poetry and society, look at Beowulf in more detail, and other places in poetry where funeral songs are being at least hinted at. We need the recreation really to know what they were like. Another point out of very many that you could do with this is Old English meter and alliteration. And that's what I actually did in one of my lectures, is the task to find the alliteration. And the way I did it was to explain how alliteration can be found, because it's not originally given in the manuscripts. The editors have to find it for themselves. Basically, you have to find long line, divide it into two half lines, and the alliteration binds together both half lines with the first stressed syllable in the second half line, giving the alliteration that is the initial rhyme, like in that example here, ne, se, creo, hyia, helpri, reman. It would be the H. So what I did was I gave that first part of the song, which is not sung, but we find it in the lyrics, as an example, and then the song that could be heard singing is given in just prose run-on text with a word-for-word translation. And then the students can find out, you can do a mix and match, you can use an Etherpad where they can work together to find where the lines would go, the half lines, where the half lines are. And this would be the result. This is interesting here, the G alliteration. So you could go back to the Old English times and the theory that all kinds of original B's still alliterate in Old English. What we have here is the poetic function of language, according to Roman Jakobson, and it is the function of, it's focused on the message for its own sake, and language becomes a work of art. So that's one function of a language which is realized. The second case study comes from BBC Merlin, which came out in 5 seasons and 65 episodes. So there's quite a lot of material then. One of the expressions of Merlin's power is his ability to cast spells using Old English. This Old English was written by Dr. Mark Faulkner. We could go through a definition of a charm as a formula by which an end is attempted by magic means. The Old English word for a charm is galdor, related to the verb galan, to sing. And at the heart of most, but not all charms, is an incantation of the equivalent. So language, spell, is part of magic. And we will look at Merlin's healing charm for Morgana, and a couple of hints what I did with this as a practice in pronunciation, lexicology, and morphology. So case study 2, Merlin's healing charm for Morgana. Here is the text, which I got from a fandom page. Okay, but that's really what he says, and the translation and my own attempt at a phonetic transcription. So Merlin starts with Ik ben. Okay, so we call this bear Old English in class, and we had a long discussion about it. And the student said, well, but it's the dragon speaking through him. So it's not him speaking Old English, but the dragon, and he can't do it properly. So you can discuss these kinds of things, but then try pronunciation practice yourself. And this is what my students came up with. Here you go. Here's my choir. Yes, they did pretty well. The prize goes to them, definitely. So that could be a practice in pronunciation. Then we could find out, sort of draw out the words ich, the, sin, dam, there, and find out which word class they belong to. You see that they are beginners in Old English, they are not advanced students. Any details or subclasses, and then use Peter Baker's magic sheet of Old English instructions, because it's very it doesn't give the details, but an overview. So here we go. And the task of the students was to find out that these words belong here. So they are all pronouns, personal pronouns and demonstrative pronouns. We can do some more details on this then, obviously. Also, what belongs there would be an interactive exercise, as you find them on Peter Baker's homepage as well. I gave a ring to the retainer, and then you have the choice of appropriate forms. So ich, me, we, us, ure, and you choose and drag one and submit, and then you get points. You can do this together or in groups as a competition. Then we could all check the words, and that's what we did in Bosworth Toller online. And we used an Etherpad on Moodle, so that some students corrected other students. You see the different colors are different students, and we see corrections by some students, and what it comes out in the end is pretty good, actually. So we looked up, so Helle, they did, I didn't actually, that's all my students' work. Lich, Sare, mit, Sunderkräftas, Ealdas, Now, some of you will have noticed the endings of are a bit strange, of Sunderkräftas and Ealdas. And using the magic sheet, we must correct this to Sunderkräftum and Ealdan as a weak adjective here. But that's another point. There is a dissertation out on the internet by Ivana Ratman, and she actually criticizes everything on the basis of these tandem transcripts. So it's not really what he says sometimes, but what the transcript says. So again, that's not very reliable either. I reference when I post my handout. What we have here is a conative function of Neo-Old English. So the orientation here is towards the addressee, which can extend to magic function if the third person is absent or inanimate, as the case here. So we would have an example of conative language function. If we look at the three films we just addressed, we see that they are all placed in the magical world, or they are magical worlds. From invented, Tolkien, to medieval myth, Merlin. So there is slight development towards realism, if you will, realistic settings. Let's go on to the next case study, which is Vikings. 6 seasons, prolific source of Neo-Old English, especially Old Norse as well. Here we have an example of the new realism in telecinematic, in the telecinematic medium. We find it fully developed in artifacts, costumes, hairstyles, buildings, way of life, and language, but only in selected scenes. So it's not all the way through. It's in scenes that characterize the protagonists, that they speak the old languages, usually when they are introduced or when something really special happens. I made some statistics here of occurrences of main old languages except Latin in the first 5 seasons of Vikings by category. So we have conversation, negotiation, characterization, order, greeting, charm, songs. So the last ones are really kind of formulaic uses, more or less. Old Norse has the most, as I said, but Old English has quite a lot too. Old French as well, and then there are other medieval languages too. So in fact, all speech functions are present. A real language emerges. The Old English in my case was translated backwards by Dr. Kate Wiles. Of course, there are many challenges which I addressed in my recent publication. There is no script available. We don't know what they should have said. There is usually background noise or music. The actors show varying competence in mastering Old English, especially the main character, Ragnar, is not the best at it. And the dialect coach is no expert in old languages, so there are quite a few challenges. And to give you a funny quote by Linus Roach, who plays King Egbert, he confesses that on one occasion, I was asked to add a line of Anglo-Saxon, they always say Anglo-Saxon, dialogue the night before shooting a scene. This resulted in my jumping off the cart, going completely blank on the line, and then turning to Catherine and just saying some gobbledygook like, "Watch me, hunga thanga." Catherine and George, being total professionals and not wanting to waste the shot, just looked at me and carried on with their dialogue as if nothing weird happened at all. Let's have a look how the monks in Lindisfarne, that's one of the first episodes when they see the sign in the sky, how they speak their Old English. And I'm pretty impressed by them. Okay, let's listen to that.
Is that what do that, Brother Athelstan? Is that what do hit? Is like a match that do hit sour. Yes, brother. It hit sour. It is a return, and so it hath a limpen. God has helped our Brother Athelstan. God has helped.
Well, God didn't help them in the end. But what we can do at that point is to check out what we have in the transmission, in the Old English transmission about this event from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle entry for the year 793. First of all, of course, we have to explain what the funny letters are. Okay, the Huthor, Insular minuscules, different shapes of letters. And from there, we could have a reading together. Again, I did it with an Etherpad. And for instance, Forebekna, that this is one word, was not seen by the students, obviously, but they were very happy when they recognized a word or two. I'll show you the result of the Etherpad. So Forebekna was usually written in 2 or 3 words, or not simpler, but also that Verdon as one word. So you could take that, or we could take this as a basis for actually talking about manuscript culture and how manuscripts were written, and how it was like to have to save the material. So just continue writing over the lines. After that, you could go through word by word and explain. And what we then did was to look at the verbs. So you see them on the left in red, and we tried to find them on Peter Baker's magic sheet. Okay, we have Isauer 3 times, second person, past tense. So we have Vulpe here, so that goes very well. The ending is correct. Sarame, okay, is week 3, but okay, week 2, that's the trick. So it's the A ending, which is correct. Ichit Yesauer, so first person, that should really be Yeseach, but okay, 3 times Yesauer, so Otto translates it as well. Is the possible form, Avriten, yes, past participles from helper. Oh, another one, has, that's a good one. It should be has or havas, but has is fine, and the stuttering here, has, the doubling, one student pointed out, but the monk is really nervous and he's afraid, and this is why he's stuttered. So, okay, you can talk about the scenes like that, which is nice. Helpe as a subjunctive present and singular is also correct. So all in all, we rated that the monks did. Right. I'm not going to talk about Tolkien, there's no time. But when you see the development within this section, we have the historical human world here. From many magical elements in the Shadow van Bonifatius to few magical elements in Vikings, like the Seer and Loki, to none in Kabulkov. And now my little excursus on the foreigners. The next.
If you've only seen the beginning.
And I will show you the official trailer just so that you get an idea of what it is.
If you've only seen the beginning of what seems to be a global event.
As we are hearing, this is happening in a number of locations all over the world. Unofficial observations seem to be pointing in the same direction, that individuals from the past appear...
Kvinne har drevet i land.
Rettsteknikerne virker overbevist om at dødsårsaken er kvelning.
Og det er med stolthet at jeg i dag kan presentere vår første ansatte med flere temporalbak.
Hva om vi teamer opp der, Lars, med vårt nye tilskudd?
Jeg hadde aldri sett for meg at jeg allerede første dagen ville jobbe på et drapssak.
Jeg nok litt overveldet selv, ja. Hva faen var det derfra?
Dette var en gammel kjenning. Jeg har et litt personlig spørsmål. Hva er etatens holdning angående seksuell aktivitet mellom kolleger?
Alright, that's the official trailer, you get the idea. And for the first time now, whole cultural groups are doing time traveling into our presence. Before, if we had the literary depictions of that, it would be individuals either going back or coming to a new time. But here we have temporal migration. And that's a very, very interesting idea to build all kinds of statements around. In fact, we have 21st century Norwegians in Oslo, that's what it is. Plus 19th century Neo-Luddites, medieval Vikings, Stone Ages, living in modern Oslo. That's the setting, and then there's a detective story and Jack the Ripper reappearing and such. Very interesting, but not Old English, unfortunately. Here it is a fictional human world, and so you see that development. I hope to show that. And Bardcore would be something completely different. With the question, who's new in Old English is it? Isabel drew my attention to this. She's one of my students. We can actually put a date to the beginning of Bardcore. It was in COVID, when in COVID times when lockdown was installed and the generations that the young people were felt lost. You see that in the meme there. 2020 is so deadly that even the best meme of the year is coffin dance. Now, coffin dance is an actual thing going on in Ghana. It's a business idea which has caught on in Ghana. And there is a remake of Tony Ige's electronic dance track, Astronomia, with these coffin dance, and that has been known as the coffin dance theme. And that was brought into medieval style by musician Matthias Link. And you see that the biotapestry always has to give the picture, so there's no motion here, there is just the sound. I'm not going to play this. So first of all, we have the tavern version, the Bardcore medieval style. We get about 5 million clicks on YouTube, so pretty well watched. I didn't check the other social media. Then Cornelius Link made a medieval version of Pumped Up Kicks by Foster the People, 6 million clicks. And then this version appeared.
Roda hat quicke hand Lokunde berom nele delante hes rat he hat smoka pipan fulle Om de utmudde beton wil de knikt he van Irish word boven On his father chiste diran anarache Tenga ich ne ut kenawe what He is commende forte, ja. All the other chill mit finjum så kom skyldon veterarinnen fram inom anhung. All the other chill mit finjum så kom skyldon veterarinnen skickrat om min boha.
I think you get the idea. There are 2.5 million clicks for this version. So again, quite well received. Azimuth is a person apparently who deals with all kinds of languages. He's not an Anglo-Saxon or an English scholar in the strict sense, but he's not doing a bad job. And so people, the young generation, takes up Old English for their own purposes. Short sidekick here, Cornelius Link said on one place, hardcore was born at a time when we had to stand together against a global pandemic. Times have changed, and although the pandemic is not over yet, we have to stand together again more than ever. So there is a political or social aspect to it. My students, however, said that they would only watch this for personal reasons, for fun, for their own fun. So what do you think of Hardcore? I asked my students, and as you can see, it was received very well. They liked it. To wrap it all up, so there's a student feedback of last week. How do you like my lecture, so to speak? What do you think is the proportion of academic instruction and fun? And that was rated 70-30 or 50-50, but whatever they rated, they said, oh, it's okay, it's appropriate. They feel they learn something, but they also have fun. And they feel addressed from their own media and fun. So would you choose a seminar? This was my main objective. Would you come to a proper introduction to Old English and learn more about it? And there are indeed, but as I said, they are intrinsically motivated anyway, who would do it, depending on whether it fits into that timetable. So that was quite nice. And will there be more productions is the one but last question that I asked myself, featuring Old English or other old language stages. I do see some indications that might be the case. So for instance, somebody reacted to the foreigners. I love how foreign language shows are just accepted now. Looks fun, good concept. So that kind of thing seems to be accepted. There is, for instance, a horror movie, which I haven't watched completely in early modern English. And the problem of understanding the old languages might be mitigated by the general trend to watch videos with subtitles, as I just learned this week by a person who Lindsay Klaus, who gave a talk in our linguistics workshop, and she told me that. So if people watch these things with subtitles anyway, they can't be put off by Old English or like that. So change consumer habits might further near Old English influence. And also what we want to do is to reach out, and this is only a couple of days old, this talk's contribution on Dutch national television, where he has the presenter speak Old English. Don't look at the subtitles, they are a real mess.
Ik spreek je nu uit English. An Greot besoblice lange gwile gestorven is. Ak nu seo Greot busy met eftkume.
Heel knap,
nou, ja, voordat jullie thuis allemaal denken, gaat het er goed met die jongen? Dat was dus Oud-Engels. Een taal die al lang geleden uitgestorven is. Net zoals bijvoorbeeld het Latijn, het Middel-Nederlands of het Gallisch.
Ja, de laatste spreker van het Oud-Engels is 1000 jaar geleden al overleden. Toch is het Oud-Engels bezig met een comeback, zeggen onderzoekers van de Universiteit Leiden. We zien de taal steeds vaker terug in muziek, boeken, films, games en series.
So, yes, let's reach out to the public. This is also what medievalism is about. Here are my references, which we'll just go through, and I'll, as I said, give you the handout later. Thank you very much for coming, for your attention and for your patience as well.
Thank you so much for an insightful and really energizing presentation. That was one that I certainly found filled with ideas for teaching as much as a great deal of thought-provoking pedagogical reflection. I'm sure we will all take some of the gifts of wisdom that Professor Knappe has shared with us away to our classrooms